Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all very much for coming. We're going to continue with our 40th anniversary celebrations. This evening we have Gurudas Prabhu and Sri Shamsundar Prabhu be with us. Shamsundar will be joining us in just one moment. And they'll be continuing with their the Leela and pastimes from this morning's talk, explaining how the temple was established here in central London, and also about the interactions with George Harrison and the Beatles' input into the establishment of Krishna consciousness in London. So how many people here were on the Harinam this afternoon? Unfortunately, I wasn't. I saw a bit on the internet. Looked like you went into some building, some posh building or something. What was that all about?
Marylebone Court. That's where the drugs used to go when they got arrested.
Oh.
But not Pizza Hut.
Not Pizza Hut. So the Harinam was good, huh? Yeah. Okay. So, how many people we got online?
130 computers logged on.
130 computers logged on.
I don't know how many people per computer.
Okay. At the peak of the Harinam, how many were online?
I went 108 at the peak.
108 at the peak. Perfect.
I was told that.
Okay.
All waiting for me.
Why is Radha-Londonishvara wearing those coats? For safety?
For safety, yeah. He's undercover, so he doesn't get hit by moving traffic. Simple street sweeper. Temple sweeper. Okay, so please let us welcome our esteemed guests by chanting very loudly 3 Haribo. Haribo!
Recap it.
Okay, let's see, we left off. Hare Krishna. We left off this morning, I believe, when Prabhupada was coming, the arrival of Prabhupada. We've been going over the last couple of days, all the preparations in San Francisco, the type of mood that was created by Srila Prabhupada when he came to San Francisco among his family, and how some of us emerged from that family to come to England to realize Prabhupada's long-time dream to have a center here. And then we talked this morning of some of the struggles and some of the miracles of our first year in the UK, starting up things. So arriving in August of 1968, we are now coming to 1 year later, August of 1969, and Srila Prabhupada is on his way. We had found at last a place for him to come that was worthy of his presence in the home of the most famous person in the world, and all the facilities were in place to greet him like the king that he is and was expecting. And let's see, he came, I don't remember the exact date, but in August of 1969, and was met at the airport by John Lennon's Rolls-Royce limousine, white limousine, and his driver. He gave a very famous news conference there upon his arrival. The first question he answered was, why have you come to England? And his famous answer was, to teach you what you have forgotten, love of God. Maybe Gurudas can elaborate more on that. I don't remember too much what the news interview was about. I just remember a funny incident as we left. Things were so confused that Prabhupada was escorted out of the VIP room where the news conference was held and whisked into the back of this Rolls-Royce limousine with Purushottam, his servant, and off they went. And we started looking at each other, well, do they know where to go? Nobody was with Prabhupada, he just disappeared. Luckily the chauffeur brought him back to Lenin's place. But do you remember that news conference?
They asked some good questions, and Prabhupada answered that I'm coming here and wanting to spread this way of love of God and chanting Hare Krishna. And I remember one newscaster didn't like when Prabhupada said, I've come to teach you what you've forgotten. So he wrote an article that what kind of God's beggar rides in a white Rolls Royce. So you can't always please everybody.
Well, with the fame of the record and the Beatles attached to the Hare Krishna movement, everything Prabhupada did from the time he arrived was plastered all over the newspapers, good and bad. The next day, of course, John Lennon and George wanted to meet Prabhupada, so they came to his room. Most of you have probably seen that or heard that room conversation with George and John and Yoko. You remember what he said on that?
Well, there are many things said, but it's all in the book, the chant and be happy. Prabhupada was encouraging their music, and I remember he made a reference to Krishna. He said that we want to be so much in love with Krishna that it's like being addicted to something. And it was very interesting because at that time John and Yoko were still heavily addicted into heroin. And I remember for long times they didn't come out of their room at all. So Prabhupada hit a nerve, no pun intended, and but somehow Prabhupada knew to do that, and I saw John and Yoko look at each other, and then I remember at the bottom of the stairs, Yoko turned to John and said, "Look how simply the Swami's living. Could we live so simply?" And they said, "No." They knew.
Well, I remember the next day, of course, Prabhupada wanted to come into London and see the temple. That was the excuse. It was still under construction at Berry Place. But the main reason he wanted to come was to see the city that he always dreamed of seeing. He'd been reading of London and the glory of London since he was a child. I saw some old photos once. Remember Lalit Prasad, Bhakti Saraswati's brother? The old man, Lalit Prasad.
You mean Bhakti Vinod Thakur's son?
Son, yeah.
Yes, I met him.
Yeah. He was a photographer.
Oh.
That was his business. He showed me once an album
right.
that he had taken black and white photos of Calcutta around the time Prabhupada was born, 1896. What a fabulous place it was. It was called the London of the East.
It was the original capital, Calicut.
Yeah, and it was fabulous green, white buildings that are either no longer there or all dilapidated now, but Prabhupada grew up in that environment. So he dreamed of seeing the heart of the British Empire, which was London. So we got in the limousine and drove into town. First we took him across the Thames. He wanted to see the Thames. And he kept saying, "Where is it? Where is it?" We went across the bridge. I said, "We're driving across it, Prabhupada," and we were over across it in about 30 seconds. And he said, "That was the Thames?" "That's just a canal." And we pointed over to the Houses of Parliament. He went, "There are many homes in Calcutta bigger than this." Big Ben, it's just a small clock. He was somewhat brought down by actually seeing the thing. And we drove by Buckingham Palace, and he made remarks about that. And then we started driving through other famous landmarks, Trafalgar Square. And he was enjoying it. I was seeing him for the first time. But he kept noticing all the for sale and for let signs everywhere. He said, "This British Empire has collapsed. It's all for sale." And then he came to the temple, Berry Place, and we've been working very hard. Most of the wood was up, and Guru Das captured a very beautiful, famous photo of Srila Prabhupada for the first time, looking at the work in the temple. Do you have it? Oh. Isn't that amazing? He was very pleased. Of course, our pleasure only came with Prabhupada's pleasure. We did everything only to see that smile. If once we could make that smile happen in a day or in a week or a month, that was our whole life. And to see Prabhupada so pleased by our work just made us feel like walking on air. So we began to live out there at John's place rather quietly. Prabhupada, of course, was itching to get out into public and start preaching. And we didn't have a temple in town yet. We were living 2 hours' drive from here. So Guru Das and Mukunda began going, well, probably had already arranged in Conway Hall and many other television engagements and stuff. So Prabhupada was almost daily driving in to do something. But I kind of missed out most of that because I was in the temple working every day. And you remember some of the shows.
Yeah, and after the first recording, a lot of reporters would come out to Tittenhurst Park, and sometimes they would interview Prabhupada, and sometimes they would interview ourselves. And I remember there was a German crew that came, and they wanted to, they pre-recorded our recording, but we were out in the woods, in the forest, and it had all this electronic introduction by George and harps and everything like this, and they portrayed like we were out in the woods, and all this electronic music, we could plug our electronic music into the trees, and they recorded us like that. So then also other people were coming. This one couple, I might have told this story, but sometimes we repeat things in a pure way, like the Mahamantra, so if you've heard it. There's this one couple that had a little barrow on Tottenham Court Road, and they closed it up and followed us back to the temple. And so there were reporters coming a lot at that time. Mukunda and I did a cinema in Trafalgar Square by this Italian company called Mondocane 3. And it was Mukunda and I walking. So there were a lot of media at the time. And so they closed up their barrow. It had incense and things like that. And so they came back with us to the temple, and a reporter comes to them and says, "How long have you been a devotee?" And he said, "I've been a devotee for 20 minutes. So I said, "I'll take over the interview." So they loved it, and so here they are practically homeless, and suddenly they're coming with us to John Lennon's estate. So they loved it, and so soon Prabhupada was in the midst of us. We made a large vyasa with, you probably did it, with many stairs up. And it was a big gallery room with a huge fireplace and plenty of room. We had a temple room, and Prabhupada was again in our midst, like our father. So there was initiation and marriage for this couple. So at the initiation, his name is Devadatta, and her name is Draupadi. So someone said, "What's the child?" They had a little child. "What's the child's name, Prabhupada?" He says, "Child comes out after marriage, not before." And then he said, "Dhruva Maharaj, as usual, he forgave us." So then, it was blissful to be with Prabhupada there, and so much nature. Prabhupada at that time, he walked with us, and he said, study nature. It's one of the highest manifestations of Krishna on the planet. And I like that. I like nature very much. And so we would walk in the morning. So one morning, Prabhupada was walking. We were all in a V. And I saw a little worm coming towards Prabhupada's feet. I called it walking on air in this. And I said, maybe I should say something to Prabhupada because that worm is going to get crushed, but maybe that worm will be liberated like falling under the car of the Juggernaut car, you know. And who am I to play God? This, you know, I'm not Krishna. Maybe this is meant to be. But then it's a living entity. And I was about to tell Prabhupada, but my imagination instead of mine, it was too late, and the worm was under Prabhupada's feet. And then the worm went on, and Prabhupada went on. And I looked in the grasses, and of course Prabhupada had rubber Wellingtons on, and we all had chappals or sandals. And I saw the footprints of all of the devotees in the grass, but not Prabhupada's. So then, he's back in his room, and I go there, and he says, "Oh, Guru Das, I was just thinking of you. That means you will have a long life." And in the room was a butterfly. And Prabhupada goes, and the butterfly flies on Prabhupada's finger. And I was going to photograph it. I had this loud Nikon camera, and I didn't want to disturb the moment, but I should have disturbed the moment, because that would have been a really good one with the butterfly on Prabhupada's finger. And then Prabhupada, like he always did, something miraculous would happen. He'd either write a great letter or do something, and he just would go on to the next thing. It wasn't like, oh, look how great I am. It was just like, okay, the butterfly was there, and then he's talking to me about something else fully in each moment. That's why I like to photograph him. It's so full, this, that. So there's the butterfly. So he's talking to me, and he says, open the window. Open the window so that butterfly can go outside and get something to eat. So Prabhupada's always thinking of all living entities.
Yes, it was after one year of waiting, under extreme anxiety, Prabhupada was finally among us again. But and it was an isolated place, so we lived all together under one roof in I guess it was the old servants' quarters, a separate structure from the main house. So it was like a daily life with Prabhupada on a farm. We'd get up in the morning and go on the walk with him through all these acres of beautiful gardens, and then come back and sit with him and talk about things that were going on. But Prabhupada began to get restless. I mean, Gurudas and Mukunda had some engagements for him, but not a lot, not enough for him to be fully engaged. So we had a chance to settle down and really talk about things and become very comfortable. Although every day I was running into town to work on the temple, I would drive back work until I couldn't walk hardly walk, and then drive 2 hours back just to wake up and go on the morning walk with Prabhupada. But I began to think after a while, well, this is so wonderful having him here with us, that maybe I should slow this temple work down a little bit. Maybe just, put the boards up a little slower, and maybe add a little something extra I hadn't thought of before, because we had him finally as a captive in our midst. So, go ahead.
Shamachinda, or sometimes myself, thinks we can really pull a fast one on Prabhupada. Forget it. Later on, Shamachinda says, when we're in Bury Place, Prabhupada's upstairs, should I stop hammering? He wants to slow the wind. Should I stop hammering? It might disturb you. And Prabhupada said, no. When I hear the hammering, I know you're working.
Idyllic summer we spent with Prabhupada there at John Lennon's. But eventually the relationship with the Lennons began to sour a little bit. although we worked, we had a group of brahmacharis working every day in the house, building things and tearing down things. It was a very heavy period in John Lennon's life, anyway. So, and we began to kind of rub Yoko the wrong way. So we all began to feel the stress of living there, and we decided that we would try to get out. And that's then they got him that apartment in Baker Street for a while until the temple was ready enough for him to come over there.
But she was erratic. Of course, she's blamed for everything. She's called the Dragon Lady, but she really wasn't the only one and everything like this. But she was erratic because Ishan and Dan were having some difficulties, and then she comes to me and says, I don't trust anybody with hair, I just trust shaven head people, and the next day she asked us to leave. So when we did leave with Prabhupada in the car, now there's different, I remember it right after we leave, not 2 days. I think I really remember the storm brewing. As soon as the car left Tittenhurst Park, it's a much better story this way anyway, that the storm started brewing, and Tittenhurst Park was known for all the kind of horticultural trees you could have on the planet previous to them coming. So as we were kicked out, more or less, and then the storm brewed and blew trees down, stormed on Tittenhurst Park.
So as the work was beginning, progressing on the temple in Berry Place, it became more and more clear Prabhupada was going to stay until we had some deities and install the deities and formalize the temple. The Londonishvara deities had not even materialized. We had no idea, as the temple was almost finished, where we were going to get some deities. There were different programs to send to India to get something, and we looked all over London and different Indian shops and antique shops, any place to find some deities of Radha and Krishna. And I'm not sure the exact sequence how we located those deities at the East London Hindu Center.
We were doing programs there at Golders Green, Banarsi's, and the Hindu Center, and either it was Mr. Goyal or somebody told us that they were deities and that they didn't want them.
Ah, well, yeah, there was still a fuzzy area there. So one day, well, Prabhupada moved into the temple finally. He just said, I don't care if it's finished or not, I'm moving there, period. And so we just made his room up as best we could, and in he came. And then here it was, the ultimatum was laid down. Prabhupada said, I have to go. You have to find some deities and get this temple installed. So he said one day, let's go see these deities. And he himself directed the whole thing. We got in the van, we went out to the East London, I think it was called the East London Hindu Center. It was someone's house in Golders Green or something. And it was all in Hindi or Bengali or something. I couldn't follow what was going on. But eventually they brought out the two big wooden crates, and there was cotton wadding over them, and they removed them and just brought around his face appeared through the cotton wadding and way out. And Prabhupada just went, Tamal, go over there and see how heavy it is. He went over there and he lifted it out. He said, yeah, I could carry it. Prabhupada says, take it to the van. Just like that, it was gone. And these guys from the East London Hindu Center were just sitting there like this. And what's going on? And then he said, Shamsundar, you take the other one. Off I went with that one. They went into the van just like that. And then Prabhupada sat down and said a whole bunch of stuff in Hindi to these guys. And by the end of it, they were going, okay. And off we drove. Got in the van, drove off. It was just a typical miracle. And we expected these things. So no one was really that surprised. Looking back, I mean, God, it was just an amazing event. But I remember Mukunda saying, Prabhupada, you have kidnapped Radha and Krishna. And he just turned around to us in the van with a smile and said, yes.
So Prabhupada was living in our midst, but still Prabhupada's always looking to the future, because now we had more and more people coming. So he was interested in a YMCA building that was right off Shaftesbury Avenue. And so that was probably the first YMCA. Not the one, but it was a very old building, 4 stories. And in San Francisco, Prabhupada trained me how to look for buildings, cracks, infrastructure, plumbing, the whole thing, trained. So everything. So this building had 4 floors, so Prabhupada was on the first floor, and there was a big gym with a basketball court, and it could have been a temple. And Prabhupada said, see what's on the other floors, and the other floors were basically a similar configuration, lots of room. And then Prabhupada wanted to see the basement. And so there was a dim lamp in the basement, and we went down the stairs, and there was a lot of debris all around. And there were like puddles. It really wasn't clean. It was old building. And as we went down into the basement, the lamp, the light went out. It was completely dark. So Prabhupada and I instinctively reached out for each other. And we touched hands. And we crawled along the wall, feeling our feet so we didn't fall into any holes or debris. And we were holding hands. And then I found the stairway, and cautiously we walked up the stairs hand in hand. And then we finally got to the top, and I opened the door and there's light. But this was a very dangerous situation, but I was in bliss the whole time. I actually didn't wash my hands. It was like I met the movie star. So also I did find the reference, even though it's chronologically out, of this chant, the famous conversation between John Lennon, Yoko Ono, George Harrison, and Srila Prabhupada, which is transcribed in the booklet Chant and Be Happy, The Power of Mantra Meditation, occurred in a small front room of the servants' cottage at Tiddenhurst Park. Mukunda Samchand and I also crowded in. As always, Prabhupada was gracious and could make everyone feel so welcome and special. Yoko Ono, quote, if all mantras are just the name of God, then whether it's a secret mantra or an open mantra, it's all the name of God. They all went to Maharishi, and they're very individually different, and Maharishi gave them the same mantra. You weren't supposed to expose your mantra. It's supposed to be a secret mantra. But they said, okay, I'll show you my mantra if you show me mine. And they all had the same mantra, so they got disenchanted, no pun intended. So if all mantras are just the name of God, then whether it's a secret mantra or an open mantra, it's all the name of God. So it doesn't really make much difference, does it, which one you sing? Srila Prabhupada, it does make a difference. For instance, in the drug shop, they sell all types of medicines for curing different diseases, but you still have to get a doctor's prescription in order to get a particular type of medicine. Otherwise, the druggist won't supply you. You might go to the drug shop and say, I'm diseased. Please give me any medicine you have. But the druggist will ask you, what is your prescription? Similarly, in this age of Kali, the Hare Krishna mantra is prescribed in the Shastras or scriptures, and the great teacher Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whom we consider to be an incarnation of God, also prescribed it. So it was very interesting because that's when they looked at each other, and then he did say that we want to be addicted to Krishna. Now at another time, Prabhupada told a Catholic person, yes, you can sing the name of Jesus. You can sing the name of Lord Jesus. So again, Prabhupada explained the time and place phenomena that sometimes you'll say this and sometimes you'll say that, and they're both right. And I think I told the story about Prabhupada saying, how do you know Krishna is God? that contradiction? Okay, I'll tell it again. So we're walking, and Prabhupada says to us, no, we're at the Kumbh Mela, in the tent. And this is good because right before he does this with us, Hansaduta Prabhu was having trouble in Germany, and he said, Hansaduta Prabhu was having trouble in Germany, have any of you gone to help him? Prabhupada just thought, a God brother's having difficulty, somebody should come to his aid, irregardless of the expense or the distance. That's how Prabhupada thought, that we should all come to each other's aid when we need it. And that was beautiful to me. And so actually someone was designated to go to Germany to help him, right there on the spot. So then Prabhupada says, how do we know Krishna's God? So I said, Prabhupada, you said so. He says, they will say I am an old man. Somebody said, because the Bhagavad Gita says so. And they will say it is just a book. So then Prabhupada says, you know Krishna's God by the ecstasy you feel. The proof of the pudding's in the eating. So then 2 years later in Philadelphia, we're all walking, everybody's trying to get close to Prabhupada, but I don't have to because he's giving me so much attention all the time, and I always studied him in practical application of Krishna consciousness, so I was always with him as much as possible. How do you know Krishna's God? Somebody says, because you said so, Prabhupada. He says, they will say I'm an old man. Nobody knows. I say, you know Krishna's God because of the ecstasy you feel. The proof of the pudding's in the eating. Prabhupada says, no, you know Krishna's God because the Bhagavad Gita says. So this is transcendental because it's not contradiction, it's time and place and circumstance. So then we're living in Bury Place, and we were doing these kirtans at the Arts Laboratory. You mentioned it this morning. Everybody was congregating there. So Jack Moore comes to us and he says, you know, I would like, we rented Albert Hall, Royal Albert Hall, and we're going to have an alchemical wedding. That's what we're going to call it. And nobody's going to talk. And everybody from the underground is going to come. Miles and John Peel and Hoppy and Mick Jagger. And this was the time when the contingent came. Ken Kesey, and I had been preaching to Ken Kesey all about what do you need a guru for? And I said, well, it's the same thing as a doctor, and a doctor needs a book. And so he, by the end of that, he was really for us, and he moved to England and became a vegetarian for a while. So Ken Kesey was there, and Rock Scully, and Rifkin, and the Buddhist guy that came with him, and the Hells Angels. They would go and trash everything, and so everybody was showing up at this alchemical wedding. Now, at the same time, John and Yoko had this canvas bubble that they would go places in this, and they were even on the Dick Cavett show in this. And it was like a Zen thing. We're there, but not there. So they would go places. So they were getting an award at the Tate Gallery. So they come to myself and Jamuna and said, would you please go in the bubble for us and accept this award, and we'll fool the reporters. They won't know. So Jamuna said no. So I had to listen to her, and I was also the temple president, so I was trying to have a modicum of decorum, but I really wanted to go in the bubble. But as usual, Jamuna was right. And so we put Jotila and Sri Das, who's now a famous DJ, Chebby Sabah in San Francisco. He came from Paris. Now, Chebby Sabah, Sri Das had a heavy, he's an Algerian Jewish person, so he had a French Algerian accent. And Jotila had a Irish accent. And so the reporters said, they went in the bubble, received the award. The reporter said it was definitely John and Yoko in the bubble. And the ironic part is Jotila's taller than Sri Das. So they said, yeah. So they thought Jotila was John and Sri Das was Yoko.
Is that the famous nude shot you took in the audience?
In Royal Albert Hall?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
We were talking earlier how
Yeah.
Gurdas was augmenting his income by taking photos of things around town and selling them to the newspapers. Well, during the middle of this Albert Hall performance, many gentlemen were there, all dressed in suits and tuxedos and sitting in the front rows. And suddenly, one of the aristocratic women in the front row stood up and took her clothes off, bare nude, and Gurdas just happened to take her picture. You didn't notice that she was nude. He was just taking crowd shots.
Right.
And later, when he got back to the temple, he noticed, wow, there's one of these shots, this nude woman standing there. So he went down to the newspapers and sold them the photo. They put it on the front page of the Evening Standard, and it said, nude rave up at Albert Hall.
I'll embellish it a little bit. First of all, Jack Moore said, nobody's going to talk, it's going to be silence. So I said, if you invite us, chanting sometimes is the same as silence. So if you invite us, we may chant. So we were waiting for a signal, and we were in 6 different areas of the auditorium with our instruments. We were waiting for some signal, and out of the silence somebody said, "Strawberry Fields Forever." And then somebody went, "Oh." That was our signal. We start chanting.
There's 10,000 people in this audience. 10,000.
Yeah. So then I went up to the stage, and there were bands ready to do something, and we cranked up the sound. So we did a 12-bar blues chant, and the audience was loving it. And also, they had some kind of, nobody should step over this line, all these rules. So instead of stepping over the line, we went on the line and chanted. And so this is going on. But there was a rule in Royal Albert Hall that you couldn't photograph. Again, the English with the photographs, I don't know what it is. People are breaking guitars, this and that, and they closed down the sound because I was photographing. But I had enough by then. So I was doing crowd shots, but I didn't take it back to the temple. I had a friend on Fleet Street because I was flogging these photos all the time. So I took them right to they developed the photos. So suddenly this man had this huge magnifying glass, and he was going. Apparently they heard about this woman. She kept her hat on. She had a hat, and really it was sort of like a silver bromide smudge. You really couldn't. Really, it's a protoplasmic mass, but somehow you could tell it was a naked woman. So that was in the photo, and then Jamuna chanting was on the front page. All of us chanting Jamuna, all of us chanting, and it said "Mad Raven" at Albert Hall. So I sent the article to Prabhupada. I cut out the "mad," so it's Raven.
Nude.
Well, mad or nude, I'm pretty sure it's mad, but at any rate, I cut out the nude or mad, whatever it was. So it's Raven at Albert Hall, and I cut out the silver bromide blob, so it just looked like Jamuna and the devotees, and they had a tremendous article. In their vegetarian loveliness, they will counteract the corporeal nature. The article was great. In your vegetarian loveliness.
This was a time when Hare Krishna was like a household word, became a household word in the UK. there were newspaper articles almost every day about us. We were famous. The record. What part of being so famous was that we went and got an agent, a show business agent, because we were a famous rock and roll group suddenly. And this agent booked us into the Radha Krishna temple, we were called. They booked us into nightclubs and concerts and auditoriums throughout the British Isles and all over Europe. So Prabhupada's sitting out at Tittenhurst in the country while we're running around all over England in our vans and airplanes doing all these concerts. And he's really getting itchy. He really wants to get out and join, get in, do something, doing preaching. So because he couldn't go with us on all these things, he would sit and wait for our reports, and we would come in the mornings or in the evenings with a full report, and that gave Prabhupada the whole day to talk about it, and we would all discuss how things were going that way. But he was always managing everything as we went all over the place with the name of Krishna, doing the zaniest things you can imagine. They loved it. The English people loved it. But we had the deities finally, and Prabhupada was being called out. He'd been there for months already, since August, let's see, around October or November. He said, all right, now we have our deities, and he set a date. I think he selected December, was it 11th or
14th.
14th, because it was some sort of auspicious day.
Odin Shasti.
Oh, okay. Good. Glad you know these things. But here was our deadline, and it was like a week away when he told us this. And the temple was unfinished. There was no furniture.
The Vyasa-san you were still working.
The Vyasa-san was unfinished. The altar itself was the last thing, and it was totally unfinished. We had in mind a very fancy altar with very nice marble, and the marble, so on, was going to be very expensive. We were making money, but not enough to pay for that. So I requested George. That's the one time I asked him for something. I made it a point never to ask George for anything, and he would always volunteer something. And I don't remember the sequence in our conversation, but it was something like, I really wanted to get some marble, but we can't afford it. He said, oh, I'll buy the marble. So he called up one day and said, I'm coming by to pick you up. We're going to go get the marble with David Wynn. And so I got in the car and he introduced me. And David Wynn was, at that time, I didn't know him, but apparently he was the sculptor laureate of England. He had designed the coins, the new metric system decimal coins. He designed did busts of Queen Elizabeth while she posed for him. He was a famous guy. So he came with us to pick out the marble. And we went to a marble yard somewhere in the outskirts of London and went through all the different marbles. And finally David saw that golden sienna marble. He said, this is the one you wanted. George bought it for us. So we had the marble, we had the deities, but the thing was incomplete. The whole temple was incomplete. So it came down to the last couple of days. We were working 24 hours a day.
It's hard to refuse Prabhupada when he wants it open, even
Yeah.
it's the same thing in Vrindavan. It wasn't ready, but yes, we'll open.
Yeah. Totally tolerant month after month, but when the deadline's there, it's got to be met. So everyone was working 24 hours a day, and even then, I mean, the last night, my recollection is a kind of a hazy one because I was so tired. But on the last night, I set the columns up on the marble to support a little canopy or a roof over the deities, and nothing was bolted down. I didn't have time to drill holes through the marble and bolt these things. So we just kind of balanced them there on the marble, hoping the whole thing would hold together. And then I went upstairs and crashed. I went unconscious. I was gone. I didn't know what happened after that. Maybe you can tell them what happened during this initiation.
So people came, dignitaries, the temple was full, and Prabhupada was on his Vyasa-san. Now what was the influence, or what made you make that Vyasa-san that looked like Alice in Wonderland's caterpillars?
Well, it was supposed to be a lotus.
Oh, lotus, okay.
Then as I was building these round circles below it, I thought, well, those would look good with copper copper sheathing around that.
Yeah.
So it just went on and on. Pretty soon this lotus Vyasa-san became a work of art. But it took days.
Poor Shamashita had to do 100 things at one time, getting it all. There weren't that many helpers with him.
Were you there yet, Mondokini? Were you there in those days?
I came in the afternoon. I came just after the installation in the temple.
Really?
For the first time?
Yeah.
The first day you came was the day of the initiation.
We'll just see what an auspicious an event. And Haladar and Jyotirmayi were with you?
Jyotirmayi.
Acha. Later she said, Prabhupada's coming, Prabhupada's coming. I enjoyed your talk last night. So, since it wasn't bolted down, Prabhupada and I are behind the altar, and Lord Jagannath, don't forget, Lord Jagannath had to go above Radha-Londonishvara. So, during the installation, the altar started to crumble.
There's a curtain across, nobody can see.
Yeah, we were behind the curtain. So the altar started to come down. Prabhupada and I were back there preparing the Abhishek. Jai, Smarahari's come.
Looks just the same.
So the altar started to crumble, and Prabhupada and I are there. We kept preparing for the Abhishek, and it's starting to come down, and I see Prabhupada's face. It's like a lion. He's holding it up, and I'm holding it up, and I'm gesturing, Tamal, Dhananjaya, come back here, strong people. And we had to hold the altar up and balance it again. And so we rebalanced it, and then the installation went on.
I remember your description was that Prabhupada was like a lion. He was ferocious. He was really angry because this wall, after all this preparation, the whole altar was collapsing.
I think it was beyond anger. I think he was just holding the Lord up, and he was so strong. Even in Canada, he held up baby Saraswati, and he held her up with one hand. I've seen his strength come out at times. He says, they will say, what kind of sannyasi am I? And he's holding up the baby.
Tamal told me afterwards that even he couldn't bear the weight of that altar that Prabhupada was holding with one arm. This huge structure, wooden structure with a canopy over it. Prabhupada was holding it up single-handedly while the other boys removed the deities so that it could be dismantled. And the next day, of course, I woke up finally. Someone came to get me, and Prabhupada asked me to come down. I was really, really sheepish and apologetic. Prabhupada, I'm so sorry, I really tried. I said, never mind. He said, Radha and Krishna didn't want a canopy over their heads. They didn't want a canopy. So even today, we don't have a canopy.
And then the glorious buried place, Sri Sri Radha-Krishna temple was there, and as we were saying the other night, that it had such a nice family atmosphere. People like Mondokini and Jyotirmayi and others would come, and we would have wonderful prasadam and programs. I saw this one young boy. After the lecture, he would show up just in time for prasadam, invariably, and he was so blatant about it. It's like if Prabhupada saw it, he would say, if you make a dog a king and then throw him an old shoe, he'll run and bite it. So he'd show up, and so one week I had the prasadam, I rescheduled it, I had the prasadam first and then the lecture, just for this boy. And he came in, and everybody had finished, and he sees this, and now it's time for the lecture. So he comes in, and I said, I did this for you so you could hear some Krishna Katha, but I did save you a plate. So after the lecture, go down and get your plate. So this was the style, and Prabhupada said that the Bury Place Temple was like a family, and it was not artificial, and that Jamuna and myself were like mother and father, and that the reason, and Prabhupada always proves it, he said that there were men on one floor and women on the other, and they weren't mixing. That was Prabhupada's proof. They were so happy.
So Prabhupada lived up right above the temple. He had his room there, biggest room in the house, with blue carpeting, royal blue carpeting, and very nice window shades and paint. Everything was very nice in Prabhupada's room, and he loved it there. He just loved. We had to turn the fire on, the fireplace, because it was cold. But he felt like the king. You know, he'd come to his palace right in the middle of London. He was so happy. And many famous personalities came to visit him, one after another. Ravi Shankar would come by one day, or some famous Swami who was visiting London would come, or newspaper men of all kinds. George would come once in a while. And at one point, Srila Prabhupada had received in the mail a big packet from Los Angeles, from the BBT there, of color photos or prints of the proposed Krishna book, which Prabhupada had written over a period of years, and had never been published, and he kept trying to publish it. So he called me in one morning and started showing me all these prints, and I thought, wow, what a beautiful book was being proposed in Los Angeles. Then he said to me, he says, but, he said, it will cost $19,000 to print this book, and we don't have the money. He said, I want you to ask George Harrison to finance this book. And all the red lights went on, because I never asked George for anything. I mean, this was our whole policy. This is why George liked us so much, because we never asked him for anything. Unlike all the other people in his life, we didn't ask for anything. And then Prabhupada said to me, go ask him for the money. Oh my God, I thought, this is it. You know, Prabhupada, if I do this, I'm thinking in my mind, if I do this, it's going to destroy our relationship. And he could see what I was thinking, and he said, you just tell George that your spiritual master has asked you to ask him. In other words, he'll be the bad guy, you remain the good guy. And still I was very hesitant in my mind. He could see that. He said, never mind. He said, Krishna will help you. Just do it. Okay? So, a few days later I asked, or I had occasion, George asked me to go to a dinner at David Wynn's house with him, meet him in Wimbledon for a dinner. So I went to the David Wynn's house one afternoon or evening, and we had a long dinner, and I knew that I had to ask George before this dinner was over to finance this book. In those days, $19,000 was a lot of money. I mean, it was like maybe $200,000 today. It was a big chunk of money. And I was putting off asking him the whole meal. It was a nice vegetarian meal. And then the dessert came out. Jeez, I've got to get back to London before I go, I have to ask him. So I was debating in my mind when would be the most appropriate time. So I waited until everyone was practically ready to leave their seats and depart. And I said, George, I wanted to ask you something before we go. I said, I described a bit to him what this Krishna book was, and I said, but my spiritual master has asked me to ask you if you can finance it. And this look came over George's face, like, oh God, these guys are just like everybody else, just anger kind of came in his look. And it had been raining heavily and storming outside all day. And at that exact moment, as that look came over his face, the lights went out, and there was a huge crack of lightning, and thunder at the same time as this bolt of lightning hit David Wynn's house, and the lights went out. And it was like quiet, dead quiet for maybe 10 or 15, 20 seconds. And then the lights came back on. And I looked over at George, you know, just ready to, cringing practically. And there was this big smile on his face. Of course I'll give the money.
Didn't he say something like, must you be so theatrical?
Yes. A wonderful proof of Krishna's miracle. Just another one of so many. I mean, it's hard for me to remember all those days because each day was a continuous miracle. And none stood out much more than the others. I mean,
yeah.
Lightning hitting the house, okay, I'll remember that one a little bit more than the others. But each day it was something like that.
Like going to the Westminster Abbey. Prabhupada liked that, to meet the abbot of Westminster.
Yeah.
So the abbot was really nice, and he brought Prabhupada water. And Lord Sorensen was there, and he was a cynic. But it was a very nice meeting. Another time, Prabhupada, to show again this transcendental time and place understanding is, once Prabhupada said, go ask that person to become a life member. So I said, well, Prabhupada, if you ask him, he won't refuse. He says, no, I'm not sure. I'd rather you ask because I don't like to be refused. I became the bad guy. Then, another lightning story. This is years later, but it's appropriate. It's a nice story. I, as you know, wanted to be with Prabhupada as much as possible. I never got enough. Even in San Francisco when they said, don't let Guru Das in, that was just the beginning. I would show up for his massage. He would teach me about Clive and Gandhi. History time was the massage. He would say to somebody, move that mustard oil, it'll tip over. The person didn't do it, it tipped over. You have to listen to your guru. He said, move it, or the person didn't listen. So all the time, I was showing up, walks, massage, meetings, letters, every time. So then there was one period of time I hadn't been with Prabhupada. It was early in the morning when he was doing very chanting or prepare. This was a time when he was thinking, how can we improve this movement? What can we do? So I would go, this was in Mayapur, I went outside his room and chanted loudly so he could hear me. I was like a little baby wanting more attention. And so he said, what is that? Who is that? And there was somebody sleeping by his door. So he said, it's Gurudas. Oh, Gurudas, come on. Come on. So I'd go in and he'd talk for a while. So then Prabhupada would get used to me chanting outside his door early in the morning. So he didn't have to ask, what is that? So one night he comes out and we're standing on the balcony in Mayapur, one building, and it's raining. And Prabhupada says, the farmers, they're asking Krishna, give me water, give me water. No, it wasn't raining, sorry. It wasn't raining. The farmers, they're asking Krishna, give me water, give me water. And Krishna says, all right, take it. As Prabhupada's hand went down, lightning came out, the skies opened and water came. There goes, Krishna, give me water.
I was talking with one of the other devotees earlier today. The subject of sleep came up, and I said, I noted that in all of my years with Prabhupada, observing closely, even as his secretary for 2 years and seeing him on a daily, many times daily, I never saw Prabhupada sleep. Can you imagine where this energy must come from? We were talking about energy, this devotee. Prabhupada had he was made of a different kind of energy. He was constantly refreshed, always new. sometimes after traveling for 2 or 3 days constantly, and seeing that he looked fatigued, I would try to keep him, in a room somewhere to rest. Prabhupada, you should rest. No, no, and he'd jump right in the middle of the fray. We were I think it was Ranchor talking about the Jagannath festival in Trafalgar Square last night. Most people don't realize that Prabhupada had been traveling 2 days non-stop before he got here. And those who were there remember, he got on the cart at Marble Arch, but he got right off again a few blocks later and began to walk and dance all the way to Trafalgar Square. And when he got there, he sat and talked and led kirtan for another hour or so. His energy was almost unlimited. You can't even imagine how he was constantly fresh. And I remember, traveling with Prabhupada on trains in India. Once we traveled from, I think it was from Delhi to Madras, Chennai, on an overnight train, just Prabhupada and I in one compartment, air-conditioned, first-class compartment. And I expected, I'd maybe see Prabhupada sleep for the first time, because it was about a 24-hour trip. There were 2 bunks there. So I was sitting on the floor and he would sit on the lower bunk, and we were talking, or he was working or something. And pretty soon I started to doze off, and Prabhupada said, "Go up and sleep." So I went up and slept for a few hours. And I looked back down expecting Prabhupada to be sound asleep. Nope, he's sitting there translating. He never slept. He would go in his room, but he would never get into unconsciousness. Suddenly the bell would ring, and Shyam Sundar, and I'd come in, take dictation. And you could see that the whole time I thought he was sleeping, he was writing taking notes. Or here's a tape. He'd been translating. Send this tape.
Yeah, I saw him sleep, I think 2.5 times.
You thought you saw him sleep.
One was in Vrindavan, and he didn't sleep very long. Or maybe he wasn't asleep. And then another time, I think. But then, riding from Amritsar, I was in the first class compartment with Prabhupada, and Kaushalya, Durlabh, Giriraj, Gopal, the other devotees were in the second class. They had, or 2 classes that time in the trains, maybe 3 classes. The devotees were there, and so we were in a compartment with some people's luggage were there. They were supposed to, 4 people, there were 4 berths for sleeping. So it was lunchtime, and Kausalya came to the first class compartment. The train had stopped. She ran to the first class compartment, brought prasadam, and Prabhupada ate it. And they had a thali for me, and I was eating it, and again Prabhupada did the Maha prasadam to me. Oh, what mercy, half-eaten, whatever, slide on my plate. Oh, more. We did it when we were with Gaurachan Goswami. Gives me Maha prasadam right there. We're eating lunch. So then Prabhupada lies down after lunch, prasadam. And I was in between these bags. There are bags all over. And so I really didn't have very much room. So Prabhupada said, "Come on, come here." So I didn't know. Did he want me to put his head in my lap, his feet on my lap? Did he want me to lie by his side? I was practically in shock. I didn't know what to do. So I moved the bags so I could lie down. I said, yes. So I went to sleep, and I don't think Prabhupada did. Like I say, I didn't see him much. So we get to Delhi, and I'm just looking out. Chai, 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 pani, pani, pani. And I'm on the platform. Prabhupada's there. This man comes, D.T. Gupta. I think he was the most frugal man in the world. He brought some sweets to Prabhupada that crumbled before they got to him. So they're talking in Hindi, and so Prabhupada says, "This man will help us start a a temple in Delhi. Get down and see what you can do. I was on the way to Bombay with Prabhupada. Get down, see what you can do. Again, from someplace, he pulls out 50 rupees, gives me 50 rupees. Who will you take with you? Kushalya, Durlab? No, I have plans for them. Well, Jamuna, Giriraj, Gopal, and Banu. And we became... So this man was so frugal that he tried to get us all 5 of us on his motor scooter. He's really trying, and our bag and bag. Yeah. So we said, no, please. So begrudgingly, he rents, and he's a solicitor, but his sleeves were all worn. So begrudgingly, he rents us a taxi. So we get to this temple on the Delhi gate, Old Delhi, New Delhi, and they put us in these cells on top of this temple. There are weasels and monkeys and squirrels and geckos, and so that was our first experience. This man was so frugal with a C that I saw him. I went to his house, and he had a locked drawer of his desk where he had old batteries in it, and he prayed to Shiva to try and give them power again so he could play his portable radio. So that was our first foray into Delhi.
Prabhupada. And it was a constant surprise. You could never predict what Srila Prabhupada was going to say or do next. It was always marvelous, whatever it was. But going back to that thing about his energy, another thing happened in Berry Place, that one of the miracles that's a little bit more prevalent in my mind is that he was in his room in Berry Place, and I was sleeping outside his door in a little room on the lower floor of a bunk, or the lower deck of a bunk bed that we had built there for the servants to sleep. And in the middle of the night, like in a dream, I heard my name, Prabhupada calling my name from the room next door. And I rose up so fast I hit my head, blam, on the bunk on top of me, kind of staggered out into the hall and opened the door. And as I was opening his door, he was opening it from the inside, and he just collapsed. And I put my arms out just in time to catch him, and he just collapsed, like totally unconscious in my arms. And I picked him up, and there was no weight. It was like picking up a couple of feathers or something. There was no weight to Prabhupada's body. I didn't know what was going on. It was just so sudden. I went in the room and laid him on his bed, and I just sat there on the floor chanting and just totally lost. What's going on? And suddenly he just kind of opened his eyes and mumbled something about that I should make him a paste out of black pepper and put on his forehead. So I ran down and woke somebody. This is the middle of the night, 1 or 2 in the morning maybe. And I woke one of the girls up, and they made up this paste real quickly. Maybe Mondakini remembers, I don't know who was there, who did it, but they brought the paste up and I put it on Prabhupada's head. And he was trembling, like he was cold, like this. So I turned up the fire and got all the heat in the room I could, and I laid 4 or 5 blankets on him, put this paste on his head, and he was kind of moaning a little bit, and I thought, this is it, Prabhupada's going to leave us. He just had this attack. Oh, my life is finished. And I even went so far as to tell the girls not at the Mangal Arati not to make any noise, just no kartals, nothing, just keep it real quiet, no devotees walking in the halls. And then I kind of dozed off, and suddenly the room lit up with the sun coming up. So and I looked over, and Prabhupada's sitting on his bed, and he looks over at me and says, is it time for the morning walk? Like nothing had happened. just completely rejuvenated. I don't know why that happened. Or maybe it was just something he was showing us.
Another time he appeared sick, and he said, they will think I am ill, but they do not know about transcendental moods. I peeked in. Sometimes I got to be his servant, and usually he'd kick me out to preach, but if somebody else wasn't there, I would do it from time to time. I loved it. Got a chance to massage Prabhupada. But I'd sit by his door, like in Bombay, I remember, and I peeked in, and his eyes were blazing like Bhakti Vinod Thakur. And I heard a conversation seemingly between him and Krishna. It was like transcendental. Then some impersonalists came to visit Prabhupada, and they all had books, and they were very thin. So they gave Prabhupada his books, and he was talking to them, and we were there too. So then they left, and Prabhupada handed us each one of the books. And then he brought out some Bombay chowta, this savory preparation, and put it on each of the books for us to eat. It was like a savory. He used them as plates.
Oh.
So then we're going to walk in Russell Square, Russell Square, but then we went to Regent's Park one day. And I like Bhakti Vinod Thakur's writings because they're very poetic, and I like them even more than Prabhupada's. Prabhupada's were instructive, purports, very good, but in my heart I like Bhakti Vinod Thakur's writings. So I said, Prabhupada, Bhakti Vinod Thakur is my favorite, second favorite author, indicating that Prabhupada was my favorite, implying. Prabhupada says, second. Again, he busted me. He read my mind. I said, no, I have to admit that he's really my favorite. So Prabhupada says, if I had 1/10 of the of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, I would be a great devotee.
We could sit and tell Prabhupada stories for hours and hours. Should we ask some questions?
One more story.
Questions?
One more story. Because it's good for this yatra. It was the time of war in India. And we were living in a dharamshala. And everybody was frightened of the Pakistanis being able to bomb Delhi. Now, I had asked Tarankanti Ghosh to come to a program, and I gave him 3 months before, so he couldn't get out of it. I said, and he was my friend, I said, Tarankanti, you must come to our program. And he says, I can't. And he went like that. And I said, what's that? Indira Gandhi said, clenched fist, can't shake hands. But now modern day young people go like that, so this is the evolution. So anyway, I said, what's that? He says, war with Pakistan. He knew it, 3 months, and then he blamed it on the Pakistanis for starting it. Didn't he? So now in Delhi, we're in the dharamshala, and everybody's blacking out the windows, and they're frightened. I was actually more frightened for Vrindavan because I knew they couldn't hit a target, you know. So the men come in. They said, why don't you black out the windows? Aren't you afraid? And Prabhupada was sitting down, and I was serving them, and I was standing above Prabhupada. They said, aren't you afraid that the bomb will come? And Prabhupada says, if the bomb comes, I will see the bomb as Krishna. So that means every moment, dangerous or not dangerous, should be for Krishna. Risk or not risk. See Krishna in everything. Krishna-ize it. And that's what Prabhupada did. Even I will see the bomb as Krishna. So any questions, comments?
Any stories you'd like to hear about London in particular?
Just a quick question from this morning. When you were approaching the MPs and the sort of... When you were approaching the MPs, how did you preach to them? Did you preach the philosophy straightforwardly, or what was your approach?
Well, the secret of preaching, as I learned from Prabhupada, is listening. Seeing what that person is about. Krishna is all attractive, but everybody's different. So you see what that audience is about, that person's about. So Prabhupada would do that. I remember in India, this man came and he was telling Prabhupada how to make a balti.
How to make what?
A bucket. A bucket. It was the most boring man. You get the steel, the tin, and this and that, and this and that, and then you put the band around it, and then you bolt the band to the bucket. And Prabhupada said, yes, bolting it, dovetailing it, that's like Krishna. And he turned the whole conversation into Krishna consciousness. So that's the secret. First listen, see what the MP's about. Now, Tom Dreberg was easy to preach to, because he was a sad man, but he really liked the Bhagavad Gita. And we became friends with him, especially after we carried him home in the Krishna van from Piccadilly Circus that night.
And later, it turned out after all that service he'd done for Krishna that he was the third man in the Soviet spy ring.
Yeah.
Kim Philby and what was the guy?
Tom Dreberg and somebody. But he was like a double agent. He turned out to be a double agent. So. And you know, you can't make up these stories that Krishna produced. They're like the festival in the Czech Republic, Geronimo and Woodstock and Lord Jagannath. Right? So, this is Krishna consciousness. It's all an adventure and wonderful.